The educator Dr. Maria Montessori once said,
"The child developing harmoniously and the adult improving himself at his side make a very exciting and attractive picture."
Welcome to Montessori Education with me, Jesse McCarthy, where we talk raising children and educating students while bettering ourselves right alongside them.
So back when I was in junior high, it was 8th grade actually, I was taking a sex ed class and something really bizarre happened. So one day at the end of class, all of our students were about to leave and the teacher just looks at me and says, "Jesse, you stay here." I'm thinking in my head, did I do something wrong? What's going on? And then the teacher she starts, talking about it's really important that children your age or kids who don't have sex. And she starts going into all of this. And I'm thinking in my head, I don't know what this is all about. Maybe I had a girlfriend at the time, so maybe it's because she didn't want us, to do the deed or whatnot. But so after she's kind of talking to me, she walks me back and she's like, "Come with me to this supply room that's connected to the classroom." So I go in there, there's a big TV set up and, the VHS, it's one of those old school, you can push carts. And she presses play and just closes the door. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And all of a sudden on the screen comes a birth. It's a video recording of a live birth. And, I'm 13 years old at this time. I'd never seen anything like this. And it's not peaceful, this, oh, wonderful. But this is loud, just screaming and super close up, right? Again, very strange. Very strange the teachers threw me back there. Just all of it was strange for me. But that was really my earliest thinking about pregnancy, because this woman, this teacher, just threw me back there, and this is how she's gonna introduce pregnancy to me. It's kind of a shame. I'm wondering how all of you out there got introduced to pregnancy. Hopefully it wasn't something like this. But for me, things have definitely changed since then. My understanding is much, much different than 13-year-old Jesse watching this screen. I now know that is not how all births go, of course. But boy, I had that in my head for a while, I'm sure. It's crazy. Anyhow, today we're going to explore birth with a bit more thoughtfulness than I got back in the day. And we'll be doing that by basically listening to actual mothers talk about birth. And that's both their own experiences and any insight they gained and might want to share with us. Now, all of these women, and there's going to be 3 of them actually, they all work with children in Montessori settings and then also have children of their own. Now, what I'll do is I'll share a very quick little clip from each just to open up here, and then talk more as they come up in the podcast. But I do want to note quickly that they together have over 60 years in Montessori. So this is a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. And first up is Daniella Montero, and here she's telling me a little bit about the reality and also potential wonder of childbirth.
Of course, a birth is not comfortable. I can tell you it was easy breezy, No, it's not. But there are ways you can make it feel special and you can make it feel nice. And that's true. What people say, when you were in labor, it's hard. But after the baby comes out, it's such a joy and such a feeling, an amazing feeling, that you almost forget everything. And it was 2 different, completely different experience. And I love both of my children, but I really wish all the women could have my second birth.
We'll be hearing much more from Daniella, but next up is Stacy D, who definitely shares a little bit of humor throughout her stories.
Well, and the guy was funny because I was like, man, I really feel out of it. And he's like, I didn't even give you that much, the anesthesiologist. And I'm thinking, well, why do I feel like really high? I felt crazy.
And then the last person we will speak with today is Pamela Green, who is going to serve as our kind of birthing expert. That's how I'm going to put it, as she has some real deal experience with pregnancies. Here, I'll just share a quick clip to give you a sense of that. So with birthing, how many births do you think you've attended? And then how many babies do you think you personally helped to deliver, just so I have some context going in?
It's kind of like I stopped counting at around 400.
Okay, so hopefully you can see with these three ladies, we're going to have some fun today. There's going to be a lot going on. So who is this episode for? Well, first and foremost, it's for expecting parents, of course, but it's also for anyone who's just interested in birth. I mean, that's whether you're planning to have a baby, one day, not today, but one day, or you already have kids. And I know some parents are just curious about other people's experiences. Or you could even be a young teenager out there like myself, who was in junior high, who I would say deserves some better insight than I got back then. So hopefully, if that's my standard, just better than how I did back then, I think this episode nails it on that. But anyways, before I hop into the conversation, I just want to ensure I get a few notes out first. So first, as you'll hear from each of these mothers, birth is very personal and individualized. I mean, I've come to understand that very, very well. What I know without a doubt now is that no two births are exactly the same. I mean, basically just as no two women are exactly the same. And every individual processes her birth differently. So I'm saying this because I want you to keep in mind as we go along just this point, and don't get too judgy if one of the mothers says something you don't like or you disagree with or you question. Just try to chill out a little bit and take everything in. And kind of related to that, none of the guidance you'll hear here is set in stone. And I personally will not be promoting any of it as like, you must do X or Y in pregnancy, or even this is official Montessori pregnancy, or this is official Montessori birth. Like, I don't roll like that. My approach here is to ask questions and listen to the answers. And then kind of based on that, and on research, that I do outside of this, of course, just decide, what I think is right and good, or for you, what you think is right and good. Or for moms who are pregnant right now, I mean, you literally get to choose what you'll do. Like, what will your own birth plan or preferences look like? So in other words, I hope each of you out there takes everything in and just then decides for yourself what you think is best, for your unique life. George Washington actually once talked about this, not on the topic of birth, but on how he went about taking in advice. He said, quote, "I am anxious always to compare the opinions of those in whom I confide with one another, and these again, without being bound by them, with my own, that I may extract all the good that I can." End of quote. Now, I got to tell you, I'm really taking George Washington's words seriously because, and this is a little personal note to add here, my wife, Alessandra, is pregnant. So we are actually having a baby boy, and he is due in only a few months. So pretty excited over here, to say the least. So anyways, I'm getting inundated with a lot of information and advice and guidance and research. And I've got to do what Washington is basically saying he does in his life. And I've appreciated those words. So that's really it. Now you know the kind of really selfish reason I'm doing this particular episode. Okay, no more from me. Let's get to the actual conversations. The first woman I'll be speaking with is Daniella Montero. She is a mother of two, one just about 5 years old and the other just about 3. Daniella has been in Montessori for nearly 15 years, and that's as an assistant, a teacher, and an administrator. She is also actually from Brazil and runs a parenting and education Instagram account, which is in Portuguese, and I will share that at the end. And what else do I want to say? I guess that's it for the prep work. Let's hop in with Daniella, and just know we get going right out the gate, so no small talk here. Thinking about birth, did you approach it like this is going to be a Montessori birth, or did you just think like, oh, me as Daniella, I'm going to figure out how I want to have my child, let's say the first child?
Yes, that's funny. When you said like the Montessori birth, I was wondering, like I started thinking about it, like what would that be like? Like what is a Montessori birth? Like I just, when before I got pregnant, and during my course in psychology, I did one of the classes was about birth, and we talked about baby blues, and we talk about different types of births and a lot of things that I never thought about because I was like 18 years old. But I decided that moment that I wanted to have like a natural birth, and that I wanted to be like more respectful in a more easy way, not in a hospital and not inducing or a C-section. And that's what I had it in mind when I got pregnant with Izzy. It turned out that when I did all my prenatal with a midwife, and I was getting ready like for a natural birth. And when I was 37 weeks, I felt really uncomfortable, and I asked for an ultrasound, even though it wasn't necessary. And then she decided to do one because I insisted, and she almost fell on her back when she found out that the baby was breech. And
wow.
the way Izzy was positioned in my belly, it really seems like her head was facing down, but it was actually like her tushy. So good thing that I asked for the C-section, but it was kind of too late for her to turn because she was already too big.
Wow.
And I tried all the crazy stuff you can imagine, except like the maneuver. There's like a way you can maneuver the baby. And I even scheduled when I went to the hospital to try, but when I got there, they gave me like 1 billion forms that I had to sign saying that I was aware that I could harm the baby. And I was like, no, we're not doing that.
Wow.
And then I went back home, but I tried like acupuncture. I did like some different types of like things. Like I even sit on a radio. I turned down like back with my head and with my feet up, and I stayed there that way. It was just
Wow.
but obviously she didn't turn, and I had a C-section. It was
So
at least it was a planned C-section. It wasn't like an emergency one, because if I didn't ask for the ultrasound, it would probably end up being an emergency C-section, and with me going through labor and having like a bad experience. So I'm thankful for that. And I had like the previous ultrasounds, but by 37 weeks, they don't usually do the ultrasound anymore. Like the baby is completely formed. So there wasn't any reason for that. So they were not going to, it was just a regular visit to the doctor, not with the ultrasound. But it was so uncomfortable. Like I was feeling there was something wrong. And I asked her, I was like, can we please do it? And, and she was like, oh, it's her first baby. Let's open an exception for this crazy lady.
One thing I should say, Danielle, from talking to so many parents and just thinking about this in a Montessori way, is that to really speak up for yourself. And, I'll be talking a little bit with Pamela Green later on the same episode, but she really influenced me in that way, and just saying, speak up for yourself. So I love that you pushed this idea that, listen, I don't feel right. Can you please do this? Which is hard, right? I mean, maybe it was easy for you. I don't know.
No, it was hard and insisting. And that's definitely the thing that came to my mind when you said like a Montessori birth. I was thinking in how not only us, but how everybody would benefit from knowing more about birth and respecting the lady who is giving birth. Like you need, people think so much of bringing the baby to the world, that they forget there's a person there, and that needs to be cared and taken care. Even the baby, people don't take in consideration like how much the baby is feeling, and what it's painful and what it's not, and what is the best way for the baby to come to the world. Definitely not a C-section, because today we have like 1,000. You probably read it, all of them already.
Yeah, this
researchers
one,
that show like how how a natural delivery is, it actually improves the child's like health and
Mhm.
how they respond to better, and like all these things, but also how in hospitals and in general, like they treat the mom just like oh, let's get this done, it's just one more patient here
Mhm.
in this table. And when we think about Montessori, we really think about looking at individual, and not only like what these steps are, we know like the child development, we know what is the progression, but we cannot take away the individual, and we needed to think on that specific child, what's their need, what am I going to show that we're interested in him, like I'm speaking like as a teacher, what I see
Yeah.
like in
Yeah.
the classroom. So if you take it to the birth experience, is like let's take in consideration the mom and how is she feeling,
Yes.
and how is the baby, and how is their relationship, or how is the parents relationships, and there's so much more that could be involved in
Yeah.
turning the birth a magical and nice, lovely experience, which I had with my second child.
How did the second birth go differently or maybe similarly to the first then?
Yeah, so the second birth, I really wanted to go again, like for natural delivery, and because I had a C-section, I was told from the beginning that I could not have it at home,
Mhm.
and not in a bathtub, which was what I wanted to do in the first place,
Mhm.
since because there is a risk of rupture of the scar,
Wow.
and I needed to be like in the hospital in case something happens, and they could like fast act. So I was disappointed with that, but knowing that, I looked for an OBGYN that was had really high rates on natural delivery, and I told him from the beginning what I wanted. And I also looked at the hospitals that he would attend, and I chose a hospital that was like they had a different, like more um, hum- humanistic approach. I don't know how you say that
Yeah, no, that's
to
right.
the birth.
Humanistic.
So the birth room, they had like in the ceiling some um, soft lights, and there was like some trees and like some pictures on the top. It was kind of like a nice and not a medical place. It was
Mhm.
more like they still had all the magical things, but it was more like a homey or cozy environment. And
Yeah.
I hired a doula, and I spent like most of my labor at home with the doula. I actually got to the hospital, and baby was ready to pop out. So they
Nice.
even like they not even like check me in. They just took me directly to the delivery room, and the
Wonderful.
doctor wasn't even there, and the baby was coming. Like it took me 20 minutes from the time I arrived to the hospital for the baby to be out. Like it was basically
No.
like 2 pushes. Yes, I did all the labor like at home. I tried to stay as long as I could take,
Huh.
and yeah, I
Wow. So
well I woke up.
I got to say, because I know parents at home are going to be like that, are potentially having a baby soon, or like, how do you think you made this happen by, like doing all of the work beforehand? So it was that quick once you got into the hospital? Is that what you're saying basically?
Yes, I did a lot of preparation. Like I educated myself. I read a lot of books about like natural birth, and I did mindful practice through the um, all the pregnancy. I exercise. I walked every day so I could know that my body was ready and I was healthy. And I hired a doula, which I 100% recommend. Like I have a doula because um she was definitely like the piece to make this happen.
Mhm.
um
And why
I
do you say that?
um be, because otherwise we wouldn't know what to do when
Mm.
you are giving birth. you are just, it's almost like you are there but you're not there, like your mind is in some other place. So you don't really can tell what you need. It's almost like a child when we needed to make decisions for the children, like we needed to tell them, oh, you were tired, or oh, I see you were hungry, or you were wet. They don't really know until we needed to be able to get the clues and kind of provide them what they need.
Okay.
And I felt like that with her. And even like Arthur was with me all the time and he was supporting me. But sometimes he would just like, I was in pain and he wanted to protect me. And he was like, what do I do? Let's take her to the hospital. And she's like, no, it's okay. You can massage her here, or you can support her that, or let's try this. And she was kind of like guiding him through it and giving him the security he needed, like to keep going. Yeah, which was nice because she wasn't in the middle of us. She was just like putting us together and kind of reminding us like, oh, now it's time to go to the bathroom, or now it's time to take a sip of water, like.
So it wasn't like he's pushed to the side, like you sit there and the doula is going to take care of things. It wasn't like that.
No, that's what I loved about it. Like we were really together, something that I couldn't have with the first birth, obviously. Like I was lying down on the table and he was on my side, but it wasn't like, there wasn't that connection. And in the second birth, he was really connected to me, and she was like bringing us together and kind of leading him into what would be beneficial for me, like, oh, hold her in this position, or let's try to turn in this way. And it was nice, like being at home. I could lie down on my bed, we could turn off the lights, I could just walk, feel home, feel comfortable. Get in the shower.
And what you said about just the ignorance of, say, as us, whether that's the husband or even the woman, that we've only done this once or maybe twice, where a doula can say, no, it's not, this isn't anything serious right now. You could just need to do some, with a massaging. That's huge.
Yeah, because she can really tell like what will soothe and what will make you feel a little more comfortable. Of course, like a birth is not comfortable. I can tell you like, oh, it was easy breezy, No, it's not, but there are ways you can make it feel special and you can make it feel nice. And that's true. Like what people say, when you were in labor, it's hard, but after the baby comes out, it's such a joy and such a feeling, like an amazing feeling that you almost like forget everything. And it was two different, completely different experience. And I love both of my children, but I really wish all the women could have like my second birth, not my first birth.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's more about that.
I'm curious about when you say that, in terms of the comparison, was it just because you think you were in a hospital on the first one? I know, did you say that you also had a doula, or was it just the midwife, or how did that work the first one?
Oh, the first time I only had the midwife. I was debating if I was going to get a doula. For us, like financially at the time wasn't like something we could do it. So we were debating and we kind of like waited to the last moment, and which was good because when I realized I was going to have a C-section, of course it could make some difference, but it wasn't going to make such a difference as it did with a natural delivery. So we end up not hiring anyone.
Okay.
But I can even compare it. I think it's just the environment, of course, even though I delivered in the hospital for the second one, being able to be home and to be comfortable and to have like a people that you love around you, and not people like, oh, you are still there, or oh, you're screaming too much, or which I heard that it happens in the hospital. They want you to get out.
Yeah. I think this is like so much in life. It's so dependent on where you're at, like what hospital it happens to be, because in doing a lot of research on my own now and with Alessandra, you find these horror stories. I mean, on both sides. So I think it's kind of like what you did in researching the hospital. You went out and you said, okay, I want to see the differences between the rooms and so forth, and maybe even the people, if that's possible. Because again, I don't want to smash the whole medical field, because I know I've heard from people that have had wonderful births in a hospital, but they really did their research to ensure that the hospital was the type they'd want to be in, kind of like you did,
Exactly. And looking into the rates of the doctors, like there are many doctors that say that they would do what you want, but then they decided to go in a different way.
At the end of the
But
day.
definitely there are some hospitals that, like this one that I gave birth, it was really good. They even it wasn't an option for me, but they had like a nice suites for birth in the water and for natural deliveries. They accepted doulas, they accepted the father, they accepted you eating and drinking in the room, which is something that is not very usual too. So they had a very different approach, which was really nice. I just couldn't get that because of my particular situation.
Mm-hmm.
But even though it was a very nice experience.
So
yeah.
From just looking at the things that you've gone through, we've got important to have a doula, probably do the research on a doula, choose wisely on, if you do end up in a hospital, to choose wisely which hospital, what type of room, that type of thing. It sounds like the mindset was pretty huge for you going in, and then having a healthy body, keeping active and so forth. Is there anything I'm missing out that you think is kind of like, man, I want people to know this?
Yeah, I think thinking in the Montessori birth again, just think about the environment. It does have an impact. If you get into, how do you feel when you get in the church, or how do you feel if you go to a bar, or how do you feel if you go to a fancy restaurant? Like we behave differently.
Mm-hmm.
And we feel differently depending on where we are. So how do you want to feel in your birth, and what is the surrounding that will help you to feel this way? Some people feel really safe in a medical environment. Like, I'm not this person, but some people feel like, I've heard of women that they were like, are you crazy? I'm never going to have a baby at home. It's just, I would be scared. I prefer to be in the hospital. So that was the good environment for them.
Yeah.
And it's taking their individual needs in consideration and kind of getting the environment to support it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a huge thing if we're going to think in a Montessori birth. Yes.
Yeah, and I like, because kind of full circle back to that individualization. Because even when you said, I've seen people that say, no way I would have a birth at home. And we kind of make these things generic. It's like a birth at home or a birth in a hospital. I mean, I have friends, and I know me, let's say in my early 20s, I would have been living in a studio apartment. Like, that doesn't sound like, if I had a baby early, maybe that's not the best place to have a baby in my quote home, So I like that you're, again, bringing it back to the individual, what's best for the woman, and potentially the husband or the partner. And then of course, what's going on inside of the woman with the baby. So at this point, I asked Daniella another question, but the audio got a little jumbled up. So I'm just going to re-ask it here. And it's basically around, I heard 20-minute delivery in the hospital, and it's this kind of miraculous quick birth. And I was just wondering, well, what did the time look like at home before? Like, what was that birthing process like? And then she kind of set the record straight by going through the details of that whole thing, which was a lot longer than 20 minutes. So here's Daniella talking about that.
Maybe it takes a while, like, for you to have an idea. Like, when my birth, well, I woke up at 6 a.m. Saturday, and I felt like water everywhere. And I was like, oh, baby's coming. And I spent all day long, like, with Izzy and with my in-laws and with my husband, and we were home, and we're just like chilling and, enjoying the time together. And by like 6, 7, the contractions start getting a little harder. And I still like stayed home by around 9. That's when the doula came in, and I labor like through the whole night. And I got to the hospital like 5 a.m. Sunday, and Arthur was born 5:20 something.
Wow.
So
this, how close were you to the hospital?
we were like 20 minutes away.
Okay.
I think 25 minutes away. Yeah. So we left how like it was around like 4:30. Yeah, I think around 4:30, and that's when. Yeah. It takes time.
Yeah,
It's
Danielle, I'm
not.
gonna have to include this because I feel like the other side was like, oh, it took 20 minutes, and now here's the whole other side of it before the hospital. Oh,
Yeah,
man.
no, it takes a long time until baby is ready. You know, it's
Yep.
a labor. It's labor. It's a hard job. You know, you gotta work on it. It's not something
Yeah.
that just happens like you see in the movies. It's just like, oh, pop, he's out. No, you really needed to, you know, the baby needs to go through the canal. You needed to
Yeah.
move. You needed to, you know, rest. And in between you rest. It's not like that crazy thing that you just feel pain.
Yeah.
No, you feel like the contractions, and then you have like some rest moments where I even remember like dozing and, you know, falling asleep and then waking up and having another contraction. It was just this on and off.
Yeah. But it's like you said, it's labor. Like this is a work. You gotta put in the work.
Yes.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Very
Anyway, well, I wish you good luck and all the best. And I know both of you are gonna be great parents. The baby is so lucky to have you too.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. We'll definitely. Well, I no doubt Alessandra will reach out again, and maybe I'll be on the phone too to talk a little bit more about everything. So
Yes, please. I love talking with you guys.
yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Adios, Daniela.
Adios.
All right, so that was it with Daniella Montero. Big thanks again to her for coming on and sharing her perspectives with us. Next up is going to be Stacy D. Now, Stacy is a mom of two, like Daniela, but her first child is actually born years back. So she's got a teenager, nearly 14 years old. But her second child, she recently had. He's 16 months old. So I think you'll hear a little bit about both of those, but mainly about the second child. Stacy has actually been in Montessori for 13 years. She is like a master with the infants. And actually, when I knew her way back in the days, she was actually teaching toddlers, and I think it was even before Montessori. So this was like way back. But now she really focuses on infants, runs an infant program, does parent and child classes. She knows her stuff there, but she's kind of came back into being a newbie as an actual mom. So it's been a really interesting experience for her. So a couple quick notes. I think one was that her partner's name is actually Jesse. So when she talks about Jesse, I just don't want you getting confused there. I got nothing to do with that situation. So you'll see what I'm talking about then. And the other note is that we don't really have a more formal introduction or chitty chat period with Stacy D in the beginning of this conversation. So just get ready we just go right at it. So get ready for that. And here we go.
You know, if you were in our shoes or some other parent's shoe that likes Montessori and is going to have a baby, what would you have wanted to hear from you, you know, given the experience?
Yeah. I mean, every woman like loves to talk about their birth story. So there's that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think, you know, my experience is exponentially different because I have obviously was 27 when I had my daughter. And, you know, back then there was not a lot of like Pinterest and Instagram and resources out there that was like, oh, do this and do that. And this is how it could go beautifully for you. There's just, you know, mostly books and, you know, how to expect or what to expect when you're expecting. But then in 2013, I took the Montessori training and I thought, oh, how beautiful. I would love to have another baby and, you know, try this out. So I think this, you know, second round is fulfilling this ego of mine to be able to have this baby with a Montessori from the beginning. And it's been really, really cool. I mean, already knowing and having the philosophy and the research done for me and taking the program and the schooling, I've just been able to implement as much as I can to the best of it, to my ability. this
So do
too
you
is good.
feel in the training in terms of birthing, like they gave you guidance on that, or do you feel that was more of your own independent research, or how do you think
You
about that?
you do have the medical journal and you do go through all the medicals. But I think, everybody's journey is different and everybody has different ways they want to go about it. And I think, the Montessori system or the approach supports the birthing process, but also really supports, natural birth and calm pregnancies. It talks about how while you are pregnant, that it's important for you to maintain calm and stress-free and be wary of any types of toxins that you're, putting on your body and ingesting into your body, because that will definitely cross the blood-brain barrier and affect in utero development, So like they do emphasize like what you eat and how you take care of yourself, like a prepared mother. And to be, emotionally sound, obviously, which
Do you
can
have?
be, given this current state of affairs.
Yeah, I'm curious. So that's one thing I've been curious with all this. Everywhere I hear is like, your mom wants to be not as stressful and calm, and like, how are you able, or were you able to kind of get a certain amount of calm with this pregnancy? Like,
I think,
how do you go about it? Yeah.
So for me, knowing, okay, so, oh yeah, you don't want to be stressed. So how do you apply it? I think that I was given this kind of sort of blessing, if you will, cosmic blessing, because I mean, to me, my COVID experience, I was quarantined and pregnant, right? So I was really just not working. I wasn't getting furloughed and receiving money and not working, and just able to focus on my older daughter and spend extra special time with her. I was able to, cook really healthy. I was able to stretch and do yoga practice. I was able to work on different like breathing techniques through breath work, guided breath work through a friend of mine, which was amazing. And so I was able to have this really peaceful existence, even though like the outside world was very like stress ridden and don't go see people and you can't interact. But I think that, being an extrovert, in general, and then having a pregnancy during COVID turned me kind of introvert extrovert, and in like the best way possible. It was almost forced focus and, able to just take it as it comes and be really peaceful.
So you didn't have a lot of pressures from work, obviously, or family. It was more like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do and just take a break, kind of.
It wasn't physically demanding. I walked 2 miles every day. It was really, I exercised all the way up until like the month of giving birth, like doing like squats and things of that nature to stay, strong in your limbs, right? Because that they recommend as well. So I just was really knowing, like, I think 10 years later, having the training, having Pinterest and some really great people that I follow that were recommended to me from another Montessori mom who had just finished her, who's kind of a year ahead of me as far as having a baby and development and things. And so she recommended some stuff that I was like, blew my mind. So having other resources from other Montessorians, they check this website out, and from physical therapists talking a lot about different positions you can be in, different comfortable things you can do, like stretching for maybe if you have sciatic, or maybe if you have, like I had really bad carpal tunnel for the whole 3rd trimester, to the point where I had to wear wrist braces. I couldn't carry things. Wow. So I had to go to physical therapy. And so then I was supposed to go back to work for 2 weeks, right? Before my maternity leave started. And I thought, how silly for me to be pregnant during COVID, go back to in-person schooling, and near my maternity leave. So I actually was able to roll over about 3 weeks of disability for my wrists
Oh wow.
and
Okay.
not even go into in person. So I basically, my furlough rolled right into maternity leave, which was awesome.
So you had a very like look, just asking or talking about the stress-free environment or the calm. It seems like because you didn't have the stress of work, it was pretty significant.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was, I had the outside stressors like of the world and, going in public and
Hmm.
don't being around people. Like that was kind of like, the social aspect of, that interaction was like missed, but not so much, as much
Hmm.
as I was able to more spend focus on the growth of the baby and my belly and not gaining too much and putting enough belly butter on to keep from getting stretch marks. I was
Yeah.
I didn't have to focus on breathing because I was already calm. Like I didn't have to calm myself down a lot because I was already
Yeah.
just in my own space.
And so when you were going through this whole process, like, did you have a plan in mind? I'm assuming some type of plan about what you wanted it to be like, the
Oh,
actual birth.
absolutely. Absolutely. You
Yeah.
have this birth plan, you write it down. They tell you write it down,
Hmm.
give it to your partner and make sure they're clear with it and then make sure that, the people in the hospital are clear with it. And, I didn't want to for example, I wanted to have my son naturally. And, in the final hour, I had to have a C-section, which I didn't prepare myself for. So I think when you're a new mom or going to be a new expectant mom, you should probably prepare for or know what, a natural birth would be and what, you know, a C-section birth would be like and healing because it's completely unexplainable and indescribable. And it's a brutal healing process. I'm not gonna lie.
Mm,
Like it was pretty
yeah.
brutal.
So I've heard that the actual when the baby is there, it's not as serious, but then afterwards, it's much more painful and so forth. So is that your experience? Been like it was a pretty simple birth, but it's the afterward that was pretty tough.
I think that it was really interesting because I labored for 24 hours, okay, before I
Okay.
actually elected to have the C-section. And the
Oh
only reason
wow.
why I
Okay.
elected to have C-section was because he was decelling, so he had heart rate deceleration every time they moved me on the table.
Mm,
So then the operative doctor at the time was like, there's no one getting a C-section right now. She's like, you can either continue to try to do this naturally, or you can just elect to have it right now, have him now, right?
mhm,
And not have to have an emergency, like not go into an emergency situation. And of course, right at
mm,
that moment, I was like, but I've been trying so hard,
yeah.
and then like, my partner was just, Jesse was just like, Stacey, I don't want to go into emergency situation. And I'm like, neither do I, so like I had a
Yeah.
good cry about it. And then I was like, all right, let's just do it.
Yeah.
So we went in for we did an elected C-section, which was completely wild. And I wasn't prepared mentally for it at all,
So in what
So,
way? So like, what do you mean?
I mean, you go from this like dark and calm space into this like super bright lit room, and there's like 5 people in there that you've never met before because you had all these other nurses that were assisting you in the beginning. And then you
Mhm,
go in and there's all these other people and like new doctors and like, you know, your partner is getting scrubbed up, they're from head to toe in scrubs and they put a sheet over you and it all happens pretty rapidly. Like, and no one's really
mhm.
talking you through it. They're like, lay on the table, put your arms out. So you're kind of like laying back, almost like on a crucifix in a strange sort of way,
Oh no,
like with your arms
Stacy.
out to the side. And then they start
Uh,
like giving you medication and, you know, then the whole process begins. And you feel sensations, like you're not asleep, obviously, and you feel sensations. I didn't get to see because they put this sheet in front of me, but I think now you can actually decide whether you want to elect to like not have like the boundary
wow. To watch them cutting and so forth.
cut open and then having the baby being like maneuvered out of you from your lower abdomen is the strangest feeling of your life. Like it's like you've seen the movie alien that
you're
comes
breaking
out.
up. You're breaking up a little bit, so I think I just missed a part of that statement.
Oh shoot! So like I like to attribute it to like Spaceballs, and there's like an alien coming out of that guy's belly, you know, like
which was
it's like
which was a joke on the movie Alien, probably, right? When
right,
the alien actually came out.
and so it's like I could feel them maneuvering his shoulders around to come through, and I could feel like the movement, but I didn't feel the pain, you know, obviously, but I could feel this strangeness of it. And then like as he was lifted out of the incision, you know, it like felt lighter.
Wow, man. I've never heard a first person story about this. It's crazy.
It was strange. And then like Jesse was looking at me and he kind of like looked around, and then they invited him to come over there, and he just starts crying out like this little goat. He sounded like a little goat. And I'm like, baby goat. You know, I'm kind of like high at this point. He sounds like a goat. And then they're like asking Jesse to come over to, you know, cut the umbilical cord or whatever. And then they're like, okay, do you want to go with, does someone want to go with the baby, or do you, you know, or he gave them Jesse the decision. Do you want to go with the baby, or do you want to stay here with Stacy? Well, I was just getting sewn up and stuff, and I was like, he looked at me, he's like, I'll stay here with her. And I'm like, to hell you will. You are going to go with that baby, and you are going to go do skin to skin for the next hour. Bye.
And that's what you told him.
Like, no, you're not going to stay with me. I'm like, you need to go and do skin to skin with our baby, because I can't do it directly, and that is your job right now. And like the lady was like smiling at me. She's like, come on, daddy. You know, I'm like, bye. And I just laid there and fell asleep. Like I got sewn up, fell asleep for about a half hour, which I totally needed.
Yeah.
And then and then they rolled me around, and I rolled around just to the sweetest vision of my new daddy holding my baby boy, and he was snuggled, happy and warm. It was rad. And then I just, you know, they did a couple things, and they put him right on me, and we tried to breastfeed right then and there. It was really cool. Like the first hour where you do your 1 hour before you get your room ready for your recovery. So that was neat. So, I mean, after all of that, like, you know, it was pretty intense, but.
So you're breastfeeding after being sewn up, you still can't really feel anything, any pain or anything down there at this point.
Well, and the guy was funny because I was like, man, I really feel out of it. And he's like, I didn't even give you that much, you know, like the anesthesiologist. And I'm thinking, well, why do I feel like really high? Like I felt crazy. And like, I can only imagine. I'm like, so you want me to, okay, well, anyway. So we tried, and it was great though, because we went into our room, and, you know, during COVID, nobody can visit. So that was also a blessing in disguise, because you don't have like everyone trying to come see the baby and inundate you with like germs and their goodwill, but you're just exhausted and you're trying to bond. And I just think like maybe people shouldn't visit their babies at the hospital, because to me that was like a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
We like waved to grandparents from the window and held the baby up like, you know, the Lion King.
Yeah.
From the window.
From the window.
From the window to the wall, right?
Wow. Oh man. So you didn't know this would occur. You weren't planning for this to occur. Did you research any of that beforehand? Because now I'm like,
oh no, dude. I had a natural birth with my daughter. I did not know what was to come with the C-section. And I was kind of, you know, because I was so confident, and my ego was like, oh, you got this. You've done this before. But you have to also err on the side of every pregnancy is different. Every birth story is never the same. Every child is different, and they all follow their own pathways, you know?
Yeah.
Sienna was 10 days early. This kid was a week late, you know.
What would you say to a parent who's, you know, like, well, no, I want to have this quote natural birth, and that's my plan, and they're like, there's no way I'm going to have this. Like, what would you say to them, or like to yourself back then, kind of going through this?
I would say it is entirely possible for you to have a natural pregnancy and a natural birth. However, it is also possible for different circumstances to arise that you need to be prepared for, like other forms of birth. other types of birth that it might involve, a C-section, or that might involve more medical, medicine to help you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, it sounds like you handled it like a champ when it happened. Is there anything that you would say before and like, oh, I wish I would have known this or that, or like what?
I just wish I would have. Yeah, I feel like I wish I would have known the process, and then and also after like the healing process, because it was hardcore. Like, for example, we went and bought a blow up mattress because I couldn't go upstairs.
Oh, you couldn't walk up the stairs.
So I had to set up post up in the front room. Oh, that was something else I would tell I would have told my 27-year-old self that I learned was in the last trimester, or the last 6 weeks, for example. I was reading a cool article about how when you double up or you take extra omegas for those last 6 weeks, when the baby's really rapidly developing, and that's when your body is the most depleted. And that's what they say is a contributing factor to postpartum, is lack of omegas, because the baby has taken a lot of it from you towards the end. So I took the extra omegas. Definitely didn't have postpartum, but I did experience the baby blues. You do have like a blue, sort of like you miss your belly, you miss the movement of the baby in your belly. You're also on this hormonal sort of roller coaster as far as symbiosis, occurs. So you're releasing different hormones, and your body's changing like metabolically. So you definitely feel not like a depression, but like you miss something. It's this missing thing. So I did order a baby blues like herbal tincture, and I felt like it helped curb some stuff like every 4 to 6 hours. It was safe for baby and breastfeeding. I got in like the second week, and I used it for like 2 weeks until I felt like I didn't need it anymore.
But you felt like that actually helped you.
Yeah, and it was referred to by a friend of mine. It could have been placebo. I could have been like, oh, I need my tincture, I'm feeling emotional.
Give it to me.
Yeah. But I think on some level, I feel like it did help,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Is there
even things out?
Now with like, let's say you've got this little herbal remedy or something before like going into the pregnancy, were there a couple things that you did, let's say, whether it's over the last 3 months or even over the whole 9 months, that you're like, this 1 or 2 things, do this. And I'm talking about just whether it's the breathing, the exercise, I don't know, whatever that you're like, this really helped. This was amazing for me.
I would say definitely do some prenatal yoga. Definitely do some guided breath work, like talk to some doulas or some people that are experts in breath work, so you can, work on your breath. Because I think as humans, we have a tendency to clench our jaw, and like our tension comes into our mouth and into our breathing and into our shoulders. And so like, we're not aware. It's not something everyone's aware of. And once you become aware of it, it's a really cool tool for de-stressing yourself, whether you're in a pregnancy or just like living your life as a mom or a new mom,
Yes, I wonder if the pregnancy is one of those weird periods where some women, and even maybe husbands or significant others, that they never really looked at breathing or thought about their breathing before, and this is the first time.
Oh, totally.
They're like, yeah, I didn't think about that. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's like, and I think if you already are practicing yoga and kind of some Eastern practice, you know what I mean? You're privy to how to breathe into your stretches and stuff like that, which is very much a lot of what you're doing with having a baby, because you have to relax the muscles, in your lower extremity. You have to have the control to, in amidst pain, extreme pain, be able to have a relaxed muscular system down there.
So just thinking about Montessori and what you do at the work, because obviously you work with infants and you've been doing this for a long time. do you think that played an influence on your whole birth experience, and what types of things you think are aligned with Montessori in the whole birthing process?
I mean, obviously, yeah, like I think just maintaining your calm spirit as best as you can. And like, you also have to have a supportive partner. So there is definitely a part of your training that's called the role of the father. And it dates back to really just primordial. The father's role is to protect the family, right? So if you think about that, the father's role in the first month, like of symbiosis, is giving the boundary, letting people visit. Oh no, today's not a good day. You know, maybe doing all the chores that the wife couldn't do, or cooking some of her favorite meals or something like that. Making sure you're prepared to cook really nourishing things in the first month. Or holding the baby like, hey, would you like to cook? Because for me, I was like, after my week and a half of me like wanting to go upstairs, I was done like in the living room wanting to go back to my room. And I wanted to cook a meal, you know, but I'm like, can you just be with the baby and hold the baby so I can cook a meal and I can do something so I can feel normal again, you know, that would make me feel normal if you took this role on. So like, you know, Jesse was really responsive as far as like this goes, and provided, you know, he did all the shopping and the groceries, and he, you know, he's also an awesome cook. So I was blessed in that way that I was like, yes, I want this. And he would short order me things. Like he'd make things that I wanted, or I'll be like, you know, I want to cook today. And stuff like that. So he was really prepared and a good support role for that time where I really,
yeah. So maybe that's a very good point, because I haven't really heard this said, but you know, you can prepare yourself to such an amazing extent as the woman giving birth, but you want to ensure that you're sharing stuff with your significant other, and that he or she or whomever is prepared likewise in their role.
Yeah. And they have to want to, you know, take on that role as well. Like they have to want to be interested and to be supportive. You know, if they don't have that natural, you know, want to do it, I guess if they lack conscious effort to support, then that might pose a different obstacle for your healing process, you know. So
you might get like another significant other at that time.
All right, that is actually the end of the conversation with Stacy. I apologize for the kind of abrupt ending there, but when we were on the phone, I don't know, I think it's about a week back, she was with her child Jude, and I think she had to run off, or something occurred where we didn't really have a proper goodbye, Stacy, goodbye, Jesse, thanks, and all that. So thank you again, though, here, Stacy, for coming on, and for all of you out there, I hope you appreciate Stacy's story and, you know, her take on pregnancy and birth. All right, hopping into our last guest, Miss Pamela Green. Now, Miss Pamela is really the expert we're having on. Like this is what she does. This is her specialty. But to start out, first and foremost, Pamela is a mother. She has 2 grown children, and she's actually the only one out of the 3 of these women who is also a grandmother. So she also has a grandchild. Now, Pamela's been teaching and administrating in Montessori for over 30 years. She's also the owner of Ananda Montessori, a Montessori playgroup in Northeast Pennsylvania. You can find her on Facebook, and I'll share a link to her site at the end of the podcast. And most importantly, or most relevant for us here, since 1990, she has served as a birth doula, midwife assistant, and just a general childbirth educator. So again, she is the real deal, and childbirth is her expertise. And just a quick note, actually 2 notes, the first of which is this is different from the other conversations in that I'm going to be hopping in after the fact to ask some questions, and then Pamela gives her responses from when we had the conversation, just because Pamela and I spoke 2 different days for probably at least over 2 hours, and close to 3 hours probably. So I had to do some editing with it all. And then the second note is that Pamela and I, just like with Daniella and Stacy, there's no starting with small talk here. We hop right in and get to business. So just be aware of that. And related, she starts by giving a little explanation of her past and her history with births, as well as sharing a story that's cute and a little silly story about this father and his experience, quote, catching his first baby. All right, so let us hop in. So with birthing, how many births do you think you've attended, and then how many babies do you think you personally helped to deliver? Just so I have some context going in.
It's kind of like I stopped counting at around 400. I started attending home births before I worked in the hospital for quite a while. And I did, we called that catching babies, how it's said in midwifery, but we had a father, this was in the summer, and we always say to the parents, would you like to catch the baby? This is your birth. We are here to observe and to offer our guidance and step in only as needed. But it's your birth. And when we said that to him, he just had this look on his face and he didn't say anything. And then he and I caught their baby. His hands were the first hands for this child to come and be touched. But later he said at a postpartum visit, he said, when you said to catch my baby, I literally thought you were going to throw it.
Okay, and what Pamela talks about next is in response to my asking her if she would like to share her own birth story, or at least one of them, before we get into kind of expert Pamela talking. So she was happy to, and I'm glad I asked because what a unique experience. So here we go.
Well, our first son was born over 35 years ago, and he was born in the home of where my husband grew up. He was born in the same house, and he was born in the bedroom of our parents, my husband's parents, which was, looking back on it, it's a beautiful memory. What I'll say about it is that, and this is something that I talk about when I do childbirth classes, and whenever I'm with women and families, when my labor started, which was on a Saturday afternoon, there's a thing that happens. Hormones are already starting big time within the baby and also within the mother and with the co-parent as well. And one of them that hits really quickly is adrenaline, because we're mammals and we want to be safe, and so we have this big rush. What we did with that, I would not recommend. Which is, so it was a big learning for me. So that was Saturday afternoon. Seth was born Monday morning at 6:30. And what sometimes happens with that first burst of adrenaline is that sometimes people feel that you should do something to get things started. And that's the beginning of sort of stepping away from the natural process within us. And looking back, I can feel it as, because we were walking, our thing was to walk. And then that night we did not sleep much, which you should sleep. And your contractions, if once they can kick in, that those tightenings and releasings, they will wake you up. You won't miss those. You don't have to worry about that. Coming into it as first time parents, even having been as educated as I thought I was, we were more awake than we should have been. And then you enter into a time which we look at as when active labor begins, which if you look at, I don't even want to say what that would be in dilation, but there's just a part where a transition starts to happen. And as caregivers, that's when we begin to say that active labor starts. The earlier part is really important, which is what I was in, but it is for different reasons, especially with first-time mothers. So we were, when I moved into active labor then, which was on Sunday, I was already getting tired. And
So can I,
yeah, go
Pamela,
ahead.
can I ask you something? Yeah, because I'm curious. When you say, you're kind of recommending, don't do this, don't stay up. I know you got this adrenaline, but get some sleep.
Mhm.
Do you think it's a personality thing where people are able to relax and go to bed? Because even you saying this, I think to myself, wow, it's already a hyped up moment. Then I'm shot up with adrenaline, or my wife is shot up with adrenaline. And it seems like what you're saying is, hey, allow yourself to go to sleep because your body will naturally wake yourself up. I mean, for my wife.
Mhm.
But is it something where some people are just not going to be able to kind of get in that relaxed mode to go to bed? Or, what have you seen now, stepping away from your own personal and then the kind of the professional, what allows for that sleep to occur?
Well, it has to do, that's a good question. It has to do with the time of day, for one thing. If it's early in the morning and you're getting stirrings of maybe something happening, then I would say that you have a balanced day with doing what you normally do and then resting as you can, because we don't know what is ahead of us. We do know where we are in the moment. And so to rest as we can and to be hydrating and to be eating for as long as we wish to do. So that would be in the daytime. Let's say if you are in bed already at night and then something would happen, the beginnings of something, I would, because people wake up, then to go back and just, the intention could be to rest and see if sleep comes to you. I guess for myself, my learning was there can't be a forcing of the process. And that's more of the energy that I'm talking about.
Okay.
So to rest, it's not like you have to sleep.
Okay.
That becomes like a forcing thing. It's
Yeah.
more to be easy with yourself, and to, even if someone doesn't usually rest during the day, for both people to rest if they can. It can be just resting and not sleeping, and then to walk if you want, do whatever you'd like to do.
I see. So this is clear. This is definitely clarifying. So because it seems to be saying also is like, if it ends up it's 11 o'clock at night, and normally at 11 o'clock at night you would be sleeping, don't be like, well, I'm supposed to be giving birth pretty soon, I better be up and doing it. It's like, allow your body to, listen to your body, see what it's saying, versus these thoughts that might be intruding, telling you what you should be doing. Something like that.
Yeah, and I think one of in our culture anyway, the story that many of us see on television or in movies is that labor starts and then you immediately, things start happening. Right. And with sometimes that happens, but especially with first-time mothers, I would say, not always, but I would say there is a slower process into it. And we want to honor that and care for our bodies. And also, again, if one labor truly kicks in, we will not miss it. We will awaken.
Oh, nice. Okay, so I know I kind of jumped in there when you were getting right to when it's, when and now it's go time. So.
Oh, with that story?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so then I would say it was Sunday afternoon that labor truly active labor means when there is, if you're physiologically looking at it, when there is change in the cervix. We see it in physical ways, but we see it mostly in emotional and I think spiritual, and just the process of the woman. There's a shift that's happening. So that began probably on Sunday afternoon. And, it's been over 35 years and I can remember it like it was yesterday. Wow. Which says to the power of what birthing is. And then laboring through the night on Sunday, and the way that I did birth, which is an option for birthing, and I just moved into it very organically, was I was sitting on my husband's lap, which becomes like a birthing stool.
Wow. Okay.
And we're on the bed of his parents. I'm sitting on his lap, and that's where I was when Seth was born.
Wow, I've never actually heard that before.
Yeah, it's very interesting. That was one of my things that came to mind when you brought this up, is the organic ways that women can find if they're given space to do that. And that is I've had other women birth in that position, but for me, I had seen one other birth in 1986 when I was pregnant with Seth. I was at a home birth. I hadn't seen that position before, so it happened. And
maybe, not to sound coarse or anything, but I'm thinking of myself as a relatively strong person, but that seems like a lot of weight if it's a smaller man that depending on the weight of the woman. Is that, would you say that, or what do you think?
Yeah, Bob, if you ask Bob that, he would say yes.
Okay.
Seth was 9 pounds and he was 23 inches long.
Oh man, it's so funny It's funny speaking to you, Pamela, because you've got this sweet kind of calm demeanor, and so normally I'll be just very direct, but like beating around the bush to ask you a very kind of seemingly normal question, like that's a lot of weight on someone's lap. But, man.
But we had the bed right there, so
okay,
we both just kind of. Seth was. I brought him up to me, and then we both could lay back on the bed, which is, you have a home birth, that is one of the benefits. Wherever you birth is your choice and fully, but one of the benefits, and in the hospital too, is if you're on the bed or near it, you can lay back on the bed. So that he appreciated that as well.
And this goes back to something you had said, just in terms of what you feel is right as the woman, what you feel is natural, and it is interesting that I've never heard of that on the lap, but I can see someone say, "Oh, I just really feel like sitting here," and she does that, which I don't think is going to be possible in some other environments. So if a woman really wants this experience where she's kind of completely free to do as she likes, that's one of the things that you probably would say is, you need to know if the environment you're going to give birth in is going to allow that type of flexibility, right?
Yes, and that's part of the process you go through in the collaboration with your caregivers over time. When I first started as a birth doula in 1989, I think I should just before, I was the first doula in my area for 11 years in the hospital, and I would go in and carrying a birthing ball and a birthing stool, which is a low stool that actually many hospitals have them now that you can sit on and birth on, which Bob was basically a higher birthing stool. But
I bet he'd appreciate that description.
and sometimes there's even, I've seen in hospitals, rocking chairs that have, it's basically you just have this U shape that is cut out of it. So you can sit there and you can birth, and then whoever is receiving the baby is just there. Mm-hmm. And I've been in many hospitals that had birthing stools available, or I brought mine in, and then they've eventually, after I was there for so long, they eventually started getting the things that I had. And so, but it does come down to conversation and finding the right fit for you. And I guess the thing that is that I find of value is that there's openness to possibility. So that if you were wanting this as an option, that you talked about it and it is there for you. Sometimes we think, and this can be a rigid stance in us to even control ourselves in birth. We think this is how I'm going to birth, and how we birth is very much different.
Mm-hmm.
So,
now, when you raise that, are you saying because of just circumstances, or because you change in the moment of birthing, where what you wanted 2 days ago is different from what you want now, or what plays a role in that?
Well, sometimes it is. I just had this vision in my mind of actually other things that I was going to bring up that tie into this. I'm old enough now that I'm beginning to attend births of babies that I caught. They're having their babies.
Amazing.
And I was at a birth quite a while ago with a young woman, and she was around 25, and I had been at her birth, and so I was attending the birth of her child. And there was this moment. The other thing is, things can be so quiet for a really long time. And that's one thing that I think is another maybe myth in our culture, is that birth is more noisy, but there can be such quiet and such sacredness. You just feel it. And so anyway, I was with this woman who was like, a dear family member to me. And at one point she was kneeling on the floor, and I looked at her and I just thought, she's going to birth in this position. And I didn't say anything, but she turned and she looked at me. And she had talked about other positions and kind of wanted certain things. And in the end, this was at a hospital, she was on the bed. And at the time of birth, I was near the bed, and she reached her arm out and put her arm around my shoulders, and then got into that same position. And that's how she birthed. And wow. It was just there was an openness in that environment with those caregivers for whatever she wanted to do. And she came into that position on her own, and it felt like a good one for her.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're raising this silence, or this kind of calm, and I agree with you in thinking of myself just and what I see of quote pregnancies, pop culture and throughout my life. Calm and quiet is definitely, those aren't words that come to mind. And I love how you've just kind of given this visual of this woman who decided to kneel down, and I can't imagine if it was a chaotic environment, or just everybody's running everywhere, or there's 10 different people you don't know coming in and out. Like, would she have felt comfortable to just say, this is what feels right? But it sounds like with what you've supplied as a doula and being there with her, she felt comfortable, and that's where she wanted to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of, from a birth attendant standpoint, whether at home or in the hospital, wherever someone births. I've been at births outdoors even. If we are, it's so much like Montessori, if we're observing enough, we can catch these moments. And I feel that there's inner guidance in myself, and I see it, and you have it. We all have this guidance in us where we might get a hit of something, of a rightness, or and also to release that as well, because then I would be, if I felt that this might happen, I don't want it, to has nothing to do with me, so I have to release that if I can. But there also have been where things are happening really fast, and a woman can come into the nature of her birthing on her own in the midst of that. I have seen that happen. And if you're with caregivers that, sometimes we might have something come into us where we may not think of birthing in a certain position, but that comes to us. And so we might share that with the woman to just as something to try.
Mm-hmm.
If maybe the baby's coming down and we're feeling that the baby is a little bit coming rounding the corner of the pubic bone. And so sometimes laying flat on your back can really help with the baby coming around. And that isn't, if you look at birth positions, that's one that people might say is not a good birthing position. And sometimes it is the one that, and what we always say is, we offer this and you can try it and see how it feels. And usually you'll get immediate feedback because the baby comes pretty quickly.
So at this point, I had asked Pamela how she, as a doula, or maybe other midwives or even doctors, how do they know when to step in and say, no, I think this might be best for you, versus kind of the mother there, or even for Pamela, how does she handle that? Because there seems to be a sense of the mother might know best because she can feel what's going on, versus, a doula or a midwife or even a doctor with the years and years of experience that might know best. So how does she balance those two? That was kind of the question I put her way.
Well, at least for me and how I practice attending births, and in the practice I'm in for home births, we listen to the woman first above anything we think we know. It's very important, because if she's getting a sense of things, then we are going to look, and we're going to place our hands on her to get a sense of things, and you can listen and you could do an ultrasound, different things like that. but we know things as pregnant women first, I feel, and it may be that we find out this is true, and we may find out that there's not that, but maybe there's some fear there that is being held, that she can release. Well, you don't know what is there, but we always listen to the woman because it's her body.
So have you, and I'm, given that you have this philosophy of really focusing on, women have been given birth for, centuries and centuries and millennia. So you listen to that. Have you ever experienced where you might have a conflict because you feel like, oh no, I've seen this so many times before, and I know she's saying something, but or are you just so ingrained at this point and it's become a part of you that you listen first? Or basically, do you have that conflict or not?
We listen first. I listen first. That's part of what the relationship with prenatals and everything is, to hear anything like that might be going on, or we might get a sense of something when we're checking and feeling the baby. We might wonder about something, and then I'm very transparent, and so if we're thinking something, then we'll share that with the family, and maybe say that these would be options for you. The other thing that comes to mind is sometimes with home birth, there are times when there's a need to transport into the hospital. And what I've always experienced is doing that at a time when we're noticing and observing and experiencing that this is not the best place for birth to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because we know how much further, we don't know how much longer things are going to be, but we know that there's, let's say that the time of where the baby is being, if the mother is bearing down, that time of the baby being born, we don't know how long that will take. And if we feel that she's getting too tired, or we see things that are of a little concern, then we will share our thoughts. And so I've never had a transport in my years that was an emergency transport.
Wow.
It's always
wow.
been, it's always been, this is our sense, this is what we know, this is what we are advising, this is sort of out of our care. And so we move into what is next. So that it's a process. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's pretty impressive. And I wonder, and this goes into Montessori and just Maria Montessori's emphasis on observation first. Like that's the number one, not coming in with a theory of how things should be, but ensuring that observations are, and you might have this has become you so deeply that, you see something that doesn't make sense or doesn't seem fitting, or you're going to recommend to go to the hospital early, versus if we came in with the mindset that a natural and good birth means at home, then you could potentially delay things to the point of, oh, now it's an emergency because I've said it has to be at home. And then, in the 11th hour, it's like, oh no, you need to go now. So I wonder, do you think that's a part of your approach generally in life with observation connected with Montessori, or do you think that came mainly through your experience as a doula, or what would you attribute that to? Because I think that's pretty impressive that you've never had to transfer in an emergency situation from home to hospital.
Right. I mean, Montessori to me it's what I do at birth. It's what I do. And so looking at what's happening and what is beneath even what's happening and looking more closely. And it has impacted how I attend births. And the other thing that another time came to mind, I had a birth a long time ago and I was at home and it was a transport. We were going to the hospital and I had this I was the one who would come in as a doula. We would stay at home and come in, and it would be very shortly after that that the baby would be born. So people knew that about me because I was giving care and watching things, but just coming in not too late, but not too early. Mm-hmm. And so this one birth, I was working with a midwife in the hospital a long time ago. And this woman, at that point, I was doing vaginal exams and I had checked her early on. And then at another point, I checked her later and something just felt different. And I had spoken to this midwife on the phone and I just said, I think she's this far along, but something's different. Something has changed. And she said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, I'm wondering if we have a breach. And so, but I just told her that. And she said, well, why don't you come in? I mean, the baby was fine. The mom was great. And I knew the baby had been head down in labor. We got to the hospital and it was very interesting because there was the midwife had checked her, wasn't sure. And then one of the nurses who had been a nurse for 45 years came in and she checked her and she said, the baby's breech.
Wow.
And so we got the ultrasound to check and the baby was breech. And at that time and still in my area, they don't do breech vaginal births in the hospital anymore. So it was a cesarean. So for this family, it was a lot to process. Mm-hmm. A lot to process, but they did it so well because I feel of the care that they were given and the care. Once we got to the hospital, everyone was just really sharing with them the journey they'd been on, and how well she'd been doing and it is true how much when we labor anywhere, if we have a cesarean, it really helps the baby. Mm-hmm. And so all of those things, and then we moved into the cesarean birth, and that happened.
Pamela, with you raising this, I'm curious. I'm just going to ask you this question. I haven't heard it anywhere, but it's kind of stayed with me in the conversation around births, particularly when we talk about natural births, that I feel like there's something a little bit off in the language that we use because you just described this event and everything sounds beautiful. And then they realize, okay, the baby's breech. So we need to take the next step that allows for the baby and the mother to survive this and thrive. So it seems wrong to label a cesarean unnatural. Whereas, if you went through your quote normal process, that would be natural. And I'm just curious, what do you think what's your response or feelings when I say that? I'm curious.
Well, for me at that time, that was because of the options that were available. Mm-hmm. That was the process that we moved into as part of it wasn't a separate part of the process we were in, if that makes sense. Yeah. that the midwife was in the OR. I think I was, I can't remember if I was in the OR or not, but I was right outside the door at that time. And it just feels like the next step in the process, which is an unknown thing.
And that's why I think, I mean, I asked that because I feel like if that were the case and we're like, oh, we want a natural birth, and then we're right up at this time where it's like, oh no, now we have to have a cesarean, it would seem like the unnatural thing to do at that point to try to push a vaginal birth. It seems almost like the natural thing given us as human beings, and we're animals, a part of nature, would be to do what we can do best to make this into something beautiful versus something that could potentially harm the baby and the mom. So I don't know if this is a semantic thing, but for me, it just seems like when we use the terminology natural in connection with vaginal birth, it almost makes, if you end up having a cesarean, it's feeling less than, or quote, unnatural.
Well, it can be seen that way by some, and it can certainly feel that way. That's why a lot of talk ahead of time about kind of our feelings around birth and our feelings around what we want. And even if I'm with somebody and they have a strong attachment to, I'm going to do this a certain way, I like to open up conversations around what that means to them, so that there can be more openness to what the unknowns are in the mystery of birth. But you go with where things need to move.
Yeah.
You go with where things need to move, and then parents feel that they are not kind of giving over their process, that they are in their process still. And then I also, in all births, but especially if maybe there's been a different outcome, I offer space, postpartum, to talk about that and to listen.
So after that last point there, where Pamela mentioned her work, shortly after birth with mothers, especially around handling some emotions about the birth, if it didn't go well or the way that the mom had planned, that type of thing, it raised for me a question that I ended up asking her, but I want to give you quick context before I play that. And it's that over the last couple months, I've been talking with a lot of different mothers and some fathers as well, and then interviewing for our own upcoming birth, doulas, midwives, doctors. And one thing that's come about, particularly with second-time mothers, definitely not all of them, but enough that it's significant, is that they didn't like exactly how their first birth went. And particularly they felt that somebody was pushing them to do one thing or telling them this is the way it needs to be, where they felt it should be differently in the moment, but didn't quite go with their gut or go with their feeling or go with what they felt was right. So that's the context going into this question with Pamela.
Yeah, and it seems like, just thinking about the way that we view medicine is usually that we have these experts who know what is going on with our bodies and our health. And I think in general, that's normally the case because that's their expertise. But it sounds like in birth, there is a real element where the mom, even if it's her first time, has some expertise that she doesn't quite know about because it's just this process that tells her, oh, this is going well or things are going wrong. And you need to be open to listening to that while at the same time listening to people like yourself or medical professionals that have done this hundreds of times and it might have some insight that you might not. So I'm just wondering, as a human being going into this process, particularly the woman, how do you suggest to balance those two forces? But you've got this internal thing telling you this feels right or this doesn't feel right. And then you have, the expertise hopefully guiding you along. how do you balance that as a woman coming in to think about both of those elements?
Well, again, it comes down to the relationship that you have with your caregivers and with trust and with not where you feel that options are presented to you. Let's say that this is in a non-emergency. Options are presented to you and you are the person that makes the decision. There's great choice there, which is important for the child. And it's very important for us as parents and in pregnancy and in labor and birth to have choice. And so caregivers in the hospital, at home, that I've seen that really honor that may come and say, these are some options that could happen now if you would like. And I fully respect any decision that you make. So I mean, an example for that would be, there's protocols at home or things that might normally happen. And in the hospital there might be, or there are, let's say for breaking the bag of waters, that this could be, and there's reasons that could be helpful, but many times it really doesn't change things. But that's an option. And then you're moving through the process, and the more that it's presented in that way, it feels like we're all working together with honoring of the process and also always the health of the mother and the baby in mind.
Yeah, and listening to you, I start thinking about just the classroom or even generally at home with children, where this follow the child, where it sounds like the analogy here is going to be follow the mother, having a feeling. And then what you just mentioned about, I don't know the way that you framed it, but it's kind of like a freedom within limits where, the medical professionals or doulas or whoever has been doing this a long time and you feel comfortable with, they might give some limits of, hey, this is about where we're at, but within that, you have some flexibility. Because I'm just, picturing somebody just like, well, I'm the woman and I feel that I should do a handstand on the roof giving my, and somebody might be like, well, but there's some reasons why we might not want to do that. And here might be some limitations. Is that, would you say that's a good way to look at it, freedom within limits, or how do you, is there a framework for that? Or
well, there is a framework, and it's based on experience and observation. And what we know, when you're in the process of being in labor as a woman, no matter how many times you've birthed, we only know, I'll say that I'm having a contraction right now. I know that this contraction, I'm done with it. I know that this one's behind me. Do I know how many more I have? No one knows. Do I know how long my time of pushing or that, I call them sensitive periods, that happens? We don't know. But as caregivers, we are holding all of that. And we're holding all of that as we do in the classroom with the child, looking more at the fullness of the whole picture, so that we are providing the best care that we know. And that would maybe be the limits with guidance, is holding all of that. And also, there are women can do amazing things in birth that surprise us all the time and are so humbling.
After this, I asked Pamela if she could offer some guidance for mothers to be, or even women who just found out that they're pregnant, or it could be you're in 5th, 6th month, who knows, and you're wondering, I've got this thought I want to have a home birth or get a doula, or even, you're kind of reconsidering different options in the hospital itself, what's your guidance for that, Pamela? That was kind of my question here.
Well, if you're having to look at what your options are, what you're wanting for your birth. That's what I always say. So if you're thinking about a hospital birth, then you look at what's available, and around where I live, there aren't hospitals that really have doulas in their practice. Doulas practice independently or sometimes in a group. I always had done it independently. But if you do have insurance, then you're looking at your options where you would go to birth. And then in that practice are there midwives. And midwives in a practice where there are obstetricians as well, they are, if you have a midwife in that practice, they're your primary caregiver. But then meeting with them and having a consultation is, to me, the first step, looking at what you're wanting and then seeing about having a consultation with whoever it is that you're interested in, to have a conversation before you would just jump into that practice. And if you're in a hospital practice and you have thought about having a home birth, I would say the same thing, to see if there are home birth midwives, and then set up a consultation with that person and learn more about it, because those are those moments where we may have interest in something, and if we don't explore it, then we would maybe always wonder about it. Even at home birth, some people will do what's called co-care, where they're seeing their physician who they may have started with, and then they decided on a home birth, but that physician practice is also seeing them, and they are supportive of home birth. So they're having both things going on. So it's exploring of options, and to really look at what is possible.
And I'm coming from Montessori background, but also this kind of fresh perspective of trying to think through a normal person's eyes out there, even myself coming into this and hearing, from one side, you got this hardcore doctor that's like, no, all births should be in the hospital. And then on the other side, you might have this kind of hardcore home birth that's like, you never should have a birth in a hospital. So do you have are you on one of those sides, or do you look at it differently, or how do you approach this? Given obviously there are those extreme cases where, they can be very, very problematic. So how are you on this, one side or the other? What's your view?
Well, birth, I respect the choice in birth of where a woman but mostly the woman feels safest and feels where she has choice and the environment that speaks to her. And so I have attended hundreds of births in the hospital as a birth doula, and I have attended many, many births at home births, and some in a clinic that we've worked out a little bit too. So my intention is to serve women as I do the child in the ways that are most natural to them. I have no judgment on where that would be. I really don't.
That's a fascinating perspective, and particularly because when you start Googling this type of stuff or on YouTube, it tends to become kind of like a lot of stuff in America today. It becomes this, heated, it can get angry. And so I like hearing your perspective. I think it's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, because you definitely seem to have this, what's in the best interest of the child, what's in the best interest of the mother. And you don't have an extra, grudge to play. It's just what's in the best interest. So I appreciate that perspective. And I'm wondering, in line with that perspective, would you say this has come from Montessori, the perspective that you have? And in line with that, does Maria Montessori actually say anything specific about childbirth that you know of, to your knowledge?
She spoke quite a bit about birth. She did, and I was today when I got back from Ananda Montessori, my school. I was looking over some of the books that have reference to what she has said, and I hold some of her words very dearly, and I think of those as I drive to births. I think of some of these words, and I can share something with you.
That would be great.
This is for birth attendants, and the person I attend births with, we've been friends for over 40 years. She's the first midwife I ever met, and she's attended over 1,000 births. She is a Montessorian, though she's a natural Montessorian. But in the child and the family, Maria Montessori said, the newborn child must become the subject of wise and knowledgeable care. Even holding a newborn requires the utmost gentleness, and she should not be moved except with great tenderness. And those are words that I think of often as I am driving to births. Also in the London lectures, the 1946 London lectures, she speaks quite a bit about birth and the way that the child, at that time, she was writing about the child, how the child should be received, and with great respect and gentleness, and the hands that are the first to touch the child. And these are things that myself and the person I attend births with, we give great intention to when we were at births.
Do you think, just in thinking of, because we talk about maybe Montessori babies or Montessori infants or Montessori children, but you don't usually hear Montessori births. So would you consider the way that you approach births Montessori births or Montessori pregnancies, or is it just kind of you use some Montessori principles? Like, how do you put a label on it, or do you?
Well, one thing that I've come into with Montessori is that because I first was introduced to Montessori in 1981, it's been since then, and for me, it is a living practice in my life. It's what I know, and it's not separate from any part of my life. So if I am at Ananda Montessori, I'm bringing myself to that environment. As a birth worker or a birth keeper, I'm bringing myself to that environment because it is myself coming there. And all I know is the way that I practice, which is holding what you and I both understand as the respect and regard of the child. And in birth, we can hold that same respect to the environment because we are part of the preparation of the environment as attendants, just as we are in the classroom. So I find they are the same. because it's myself bringing myself to those experiences. The question is, how will I meet these?
So it's fascinating you saying it like this. And I sometimes struggle with this because people ask me, well, is this Montessori? And I think today, at least from my perspective, when I've seen that people kind of want a 10 commandments, they want to be told Montessori said this and therefore that. And I tend to have the same approach as you. Like Montessori is integrated into my life. It's not just when I walk into a classroom, I turn into Montessori Jessie. And I wonder how much of your work has been influenced by just that, maybe the scientific element of Maria Montessori, her observational element, where it's like, well, let's look and see what's actually helpful for the baby or for the mother. And then I know you do a lot of work, or at least discuss, before the pregnancy. So what you can do with the baby before the pregnancy, which I think, even only a few decades previously, people weren't really thinking about this, or not many people were. So is there something with that kind of, we need to observe, but it's difficult because the baby's, inside of the mother or the woman. Are there things that we can observe, and how do we do that about a baby that's maybe inside, when we can't do that traditional view of observation, like Montessori, looking at a child out there or looking at the environment out there?
So do you mean as birth attendants or as a parent?
Yeah, maybe as a parent's perspective, because, a lot of parents say, well, I can't, it's just in there, it's growing, I can't really see anything. What type of observations can we be making, both as fathers, in my case, and then as mothers with the baby inside?
I presented on this quite often. During pregnancy, there's a collaborative experience that's happening. If we are open to that, where we can, as the mother and as the co-parent, be deeply connected to our unborn child. And through many different ways, through talking to our child, through touch, and the baby will be very responsive to us. I mean, there have been many studies done on these things, but for example, the baby responds differently to each voice, and to a lower tone voice, as in a man, the baby will respond a little differently and even move differently in the belly. To read to your child, to sing, to do all of the things with the imagination, maybe to start, that this child is within me and living a full life, and we can participate together. And I'll give you this was a very fun thing that happened recently at a prenatal I was at. And at home, we will palpate the belly so we can feel the baby's position, and we can also measure to get the growth of the baby and those things. This baby was very active and responsive to my hands being there. And this child was a boy, a male, and he pushed his foot up towards like her ribs, so I could literally hold his foot gently, and then he pulled his foot back in.
Wow. And
then it came back up. I just kind of like tickled, and then I went back in. So there's relationship there.
Amazing. My next question for Pamela is kind of just a real simple one, a curiosity question for me, is that, how often are women, when they're birthing, are they just losing it? That kind of just cussing, just getting kind of aggro. That was my question for her.
That can certainly happen. Sometimes there is voicing that happens. It can be loud, it can be like a guttural sound. And then other times there could be yelling or screaming, which is helpful for that woman at that time. And that's sometimes an indication that birth is something shifting in the birth process. The baby's probably moved down kind of quickly. And there can be times where fear to me always comes up in birth in women of the unknown. Mm-hmm. And it's not judged or anything, but it can come up. And if you see in the body that someone is expressing that in ways that create tightness and create a holding back, then that's something we talk about again in preparing for birth. I would talk about, or we would explore in childbirth classes.
Well, that was really closing it up with Pamela. But before we hopped off, I wanted to just see if she had anything else she wanted to share with everyone, myself and everyone else out there. So this is her kind of closing.
I'm grateful again to be here and to share some of my experience. I feel that whoever it is, wherever we are born, to give thought to the first hands that touch a human being and what that says about the world they're coming into is another thing that I keep close in my heart. And that can be true wherever we birth.
All right. What a ride. Quick apologies for the abrupt ending there. No, real goodbye with Pamela. So we had just kept talking, and I think I forgot to even record an official send-off. So, but a huge, huge thank you to all of these mothers. So Pamela Green, Stacy D, Daniella Montero. I will be sharing links from each of them on the episode webpage, so definitely check that out. That's at montessorieducation.com. And that will be, some recommendations from them, Pamela's website, I think Daniella's Instagram page, that type of thing. And I don't really want to add anything to what these women said. And we're over 2 hours here anyway, so this is crazy long. So I'm just going to close out. Please let me know if you found this episode, useful or enjoyable or whatever you want to share, as I always appreciate the feedback. And it's kind of just plain fun hearing from you all out there. So, all right, that's it. Take care, everyone. And my very, very best wishes to all the pregnant moms out there. Just such exciting times for you, for me. Anyhow, adios for now and talk soon.